It was the basis for Logan and the launchpad of one of Jeff Lemire's most underrated series, but is the original Old Man Logan as good as teenage Marcus remembers? Woof woof! Hey guys, it's me Marcus aka the Mad Dog and we're back with another video. Written by Mark Millar and illustrated by Steve McNiven, the first issue in this arc of Wolverine was published by Marvel Comics in June of 2008, with the finale, the giant-sized special, being released in September of the next year, and the heroes of the Marvel Universe have been dead for 50 years. Logan, having pursued a quieter life following the rise of the supervillains, is doing whatever he can to make ends meet, but the threat of the Hulk gang will force him on a journey across the country as Hawkeye's protector. But what use is he if the Wolverine died decades ago? And what did Logan do that was so awful that it made him promise to never pop his claws again? Steve McNiven's always been one of those artists that I forget how much I enjoy his work until I see it again. I feel like he's a cross between an Ed McGuinness and a Jim Lee type, which is ideal for me, and I love how much he has worked with Millar, but I'm a bit conflicted on if this was the right tone for Old Man Logan. But if we could take a moment to separate the art from the narrative, McNiven is great at bringing that big, bombastic vibe to the page. It's cinematic throughout and has a similar feel as when you see the art of Brian Hitch, because it isn't like your run-of-the-mill book and it isn't part of regular continuity, so having this style just made it feel like we were watching some kind of event. And if you've watched anime reviews before, you know I can normally nitpick about one particular element that isn't exactly spot on, but I didn't have that here, and there was ample opportunity because there was such a wide variety of scenes throughout this title. Landscapes, double page spreads, close-ups, different focus points, and all of it was incredibly well done. What's best is that it wasn't just the action that was the star of the show. Especially in the first issue, there's a lot of focus on the emotional side of Logan's life, which I can imagine could be quite tricky from an art perspective since he's hardly the most emotive character, but somehow McNiven did it and zeroed in on the subtleties of his expression to illustrate what isn't being said. But when it comes to Mark Millar, the action is where it's at. I really enjoyed the way bodies were exaggerated but not to an overblown level, and they moved in a way that suited their proportions. Yeah, that sentence didn't make much sense. What I mean is, the Hulk gang can throw a lot more weight into an attack, Hawkeye is more nimble, and Logan is kind of this nice middle ground. It all just helped make a bit of sense in a world that didn't make much sense. There was a great range of action too, especially considering this was quite a short series and McNiven brought it with every scene. Car chases, fights, infiltration missions, all of it was a joy to look at because of his penciling work. The only problems I have with it is that sometimes it could look too sharp, almost like it wasn't done by a person. It was as if the pages had been ran through Instagram and just turned sharpen in structure up to 100. There were times where it felt too crisp, and they would have benefited from a bit of motion blur or action lines to help maintain a sense of speed or add in some confusion. Additionally, and I know this is a personal preference thing that I mentioned earlier, but I do wonder if this was the best look for this story. When this duo worked together for Civil War, it made a lot of sense because it was trying to be as grounded and realistic as that universe would allow it. Whereas having someone like a Michael Lark or a Sean Phillips could have given this a grittier, more obscure look to help it feel less realistic and match the world of the story. Or maybe it's a case that Millar should have varied it up in the scripting because they travel across the whole country, but the only environment I remember is desert. Then again, that was more just a feeling that I had in certain parts, and it didn't derail my enjoyment of the book altogether. I will never avoid a story because McNiven's working on it, it's just that his style works better in other books. And regardless, it is just a fun style to have in a bigger format, so hopefully this omnibus gets reprinted soon. And if it does and you want to pick it up or any other books, then you can get them for a little bit less with the discount codes that we've got with the channel sponsor, Organic Price Books. They've got great packaging, fast shipping, and amazing customer services, and if you use code WOOFWOOF, you'll get $2 off your order. And if you're ordering 3 or more books and you want them to be delivered together, make sure you use code WOOFWOOF, ship it together for 5% off your entire order. Don't worry, you can just copy and paste them from the description down below, and you can use these codes as many times as you like. There's a weird stigma around Mark Millar books that they're often just the equivalent to a big summer blockbuster, but there's very rarely much substance beneath the surface. And I find that unfair, it's just that Millar actually wants you to be entertained during his books. Although it's not flawless in everything it does, and it does make some big mistakes, there is so much that I enjoyed with this book, and it's as fun as it was the first time that I read it. I knew after being bored half to death with Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow that I just needed something that was the equivalent of licking a battery, and I definitely got that here. The thing that was abundantly clear from the first issue is that this is still the Logan that we knew, even if he's forced himself into a quieter life and it's 50 years later. My biggest problem with the whole "it's the end stage for the character" stories is that they try so hard to separate them from who you already know, or just do whatever it was that Spider-Man Reign did. But because the world of Old Man Logan is so jarring, it was able to just give us a placid version of Logan that was still recognisable. But Millar did a great job of giving puzzle pieces for some aspects and leaving us completely clueless to others. Why is there a Hulk gang running around? If you stick with it, you'll get the answers. Why won't Logan pop his claws? Well, without that being a mystery from the beginning, we'd lose a massive part of this story. But what is the Lizard King on the map? Or why is there a gang of Ghost Riders? You just have to kind of accept that we can't see that in here. And that really is a key strength of this story arc. The world. More so the story behind it, because if I'm honest, a lot of the locales they went to were just barren wastelands. And even with that, I say it's a story, but let's be honest, this was just Millar copying and pasting the backstory of Wanted into the Marvel Universe. Hey, I'm not complaining, I really enjoyed Wanted, but it's clear that that's what's going on here. On top of that, I feel this part of the universe has aged so well thanks to the revival of the Old Man Logan storyline. I only read the first arc of the Lemire run, and I want to go back to it. It's the reason why I'm doing this video, but especially as an introduction to this world, I think Millar set up a lot of great things here that others can build on. It's packed full of elements that made me ask questions, and the best thing is, it felt like there was more going on outside of the story we were being told. And I think that's even more impressive because Millar had no intention of exploring them. But yeah, I could go for storylines set in this world that aren't following Logan. That's how much potential was in here. Like for example, what's going on in Europe in this universe? Do they still have a great company that offers free shipping in the EU and free gifts with every order? And if you think that sounds great now, it's because I'm talking about Comics Bugle. They've been a massive support to this channel, and they can be to you as well, because if you use code WOOFWOOF, you'll get 3% off all items that aren't already in a sale. So if you're in the EU, get your orders in. An underrated aspect I forgot about this book that worked really well was the pacing. Especially when you think of Millar, he has this reputation of being bombastic and chaotic, but the first issue was this methodical introduction to the world of Old Man Logan. This teases at what's not right and why, and gives us a struggle that's believable for his character. The only aspect of this where I wasn't a major fan is that I just didn't care about this new family of his. Seeing Logan debate on if he's got to sell his kid's Game Boy, yeah, it's a sort of interesting wrinkle I guess, but I honestly wasn't invested in what happened with them, and by extension I didn't care about the why behind Logan's quest. The only saving grace to that is that it doesn't feel as if Millar puts a lot of focus on Logan's personal life, and just uses it as a catalyst for the adventure. There was also the scene of Logan just taking a beating from the Hulk gang, and seeing the Wolverine be so defeated was quite sad, and the entire time I was just willing him to snap and do something. Like, we got to see his vision of how it should go down, but I'm just sad that that wasn't the reality. If anything, the weight of his past is more of a burden to him than that of his present day concerns, and I loved that, and it was such a smart move. This wasn't the first time I've read this book, so I knew the backstory, and it makes this a different experience. When Logan speaks, you understand where the words are coming from. When he's in a conflict and doesn't pop his claws, it makes sense, and just travelling across this version of America, I could tell he felt guilty that this had happened. Having Hawkeye in this was a smart choice too. Even just a little nod to his villainous past made me go, yeah, he'd be the one to turn if the world went downhill, and the dynamic between him and Logan kept things interesting in some of the more quiet issues. I did roll my eyes when it was revealed that he was blind, but this didn't become as much of a gimmick as it sounded like it would be, and Clint still had a lot to give. As well, despite having familiar names cropping up throughout, none of them took away from Logan or stole the show. It was still very much his story, and I like the conversations we were able to see in here because Hawkeye was in the supporting character role. I wasn't super invested in the storyline involving his daughter, which is a bit odd considering I had the same complaint about Logan, but it did give us some of the better action scenes within this series. And for as much as I imagine it has its detractors, the action when it did happen was big, dumb, cinematic, and found a way to feed into the story. Even when Logan's driving the spider buggy along the side of a building, it didn't just feel like the next set piece that we had to wait for, but a piece of the whole. One of my favourite action moments was saved until the final issue, and don't worry, spoilers aren't starting yet, but it required Logan to be stealthy and plot out his plan of attack, similar to when the Hellfire Club attacked the Xavier Mansion in the Dark Phoenix saga, and it was as if everything he'd tried to subvert for the last 50 years just snapped back, and he looked more comfortable in that moment than he did in the earlier issues. You know, besides the blinding rage that's going on inside him. But I have this weird problem when it comes to Mark Millar books that shows up more often than not. Don't get me wrong, I love how he isn't afraid of telling the story that he wants. If he needs to push things into an absurd realm, he will just do it, and that's quite a high risk, high reward strategy. And Old Man Logan has times where that succeeds, but then others where it just throws me out of the story. On one hand, you get the phenomenal backstory that is dark, shocking, and sticks with you long after you finish the book. But on the other hand, you've got a weird Venom T-Rex that never gets explained, and for some reason there's a cannibalism moment that's just in here for the sake of being shocking. And why was cannibalism such a big thing in the 2000s for Marvel alternate universes? Like, I thought it was an alternate universe thing, but now I'm starting to wonder if it was maybe just Mark Millar. Oh god, does this mean I'm gonna have to go back and edit the entry in the iceberg? It's just disappointing because there is so much life and story in this world that he just doesn't need to go that extra level. And some of the things that I liked most in this story was because he was willing to take those risks, but it's just as if Millar doesn't know when he's done enough. Yet for some reason, despite all these years, there's something about Old Man Logan that keeps me coming back. It's in a similar league to something like Batman Hush that I know it's not perfect, but it's just good fun. On top of that, I think there is something special here that sets it apart from the other alternate universes that we've seen over the years. And ironically, I believe it's that loose sense of finality. I think it's a somewhat fitting conclusion for Wolverine, where the character is handled with care, in pretty much the Marvel version of the Mad Max universe. I think it's easy to look at this title and other books that Mark Millar's done and just focus on all the craziness, but what often gets forgotten about with his works is the amount of heart and passion in there, even if it doesn't always stick the landing. We remember the cringe of Captain America asking if the A on his helmet stands for France, or the Hulk trying to eat the Wasp, but instead we should remember the moment when the shit hit the fan in Jupiter's Legacy, or when Kick-Ass hit the scene and took the comic world by storm, or how racked with guilt Logan was when he revealed the secret he's been carrying for 50 years. And I think this book deserves the respect that I don't hear it getting that often. I don't know, I'm probably just rambling at this point, and the people who do hate this storyline probably didn't even watch to this point before commenting. I just wanted to do a video about a book I had a great time with and say why. But then again, I can't speak more about this book without jumping into spoilers. This is your final spoiler warning, so if you don't want anything ruined, make sure you skip to the final verdict. So I can't start this spoiler section off with anything other than the big reveal that Wolverine was tricked into killing the X-Men. Honestly, this was a tough issue to read because I had the benefit of hindsight this time around, but I vividly remember how entertaining the invasion at the Xavier school was the first time I read this. And then of course I felt really guilty after the reveal. But the reason why I think this is such a good twist is because it makes more sense when you actually know about it. When I went back and read it this time around, it made me question who was who when Logan was fighting, and then when you read the earlier issues before it's revealed, you can just feel the weight of this mistake resting on him. It does carry forward with every decision that he makes, and it makes me wonder if this is the reason why there wasn't that much focus on Wolverine's new family. He knows he's this deadly thing that can kill his family, so what's the real reason to get attached? And yeah, I'll admit, maybe it's not the least predictable twist, but it's still one of the darkest in mainstream Marvel. But in typical fashion like the rest of my reviews, for everything that I compliment, there's something that irked me. And for as much as I love how dark, twisted, and mean the Xavier School twist was, I hated the reveal that Banner had a baby with She-Hulk. It's just a bit too... Ultimates 3, if you catch me drift. I just felt it strayed too far into the absurd side of the dystopia to the point where it wasn't believable. It's similar to the symbiote T-Rex, where it's just there to be an abstract, bizarre thing, rather than an element that actually adds to the plot. Like, what if they didn't make Banner have a baby with his cousin? Why was that a thing that Mark Millar felt was necessary to include? Annoyingly though, I was quite okay with Bruce being behind the Hulk gang attack on Wolverine's family, but if this was intended to be the concluding story of Logan, it feels poetic that the Hulk would be the big fight that brings Wolverine back out of retirement. And I do really enjoy when these types of stories try to connect back to the character's roots. But I just wish the whole Hulk incest thing didn't have to be mentioned. I would have been fine if they left that out. Oh, one more thing, the fight with Red Skull. I liked it, but I'm really glad that this wasn't the final fight. Again, Hulk being the last battle made more sense for his character, but just having Logan going up against a decrepit Red Skull in his trophy room was a fun scene. It felt in a way like Logan was trying to regain part of the respect for himself he would have lost from killing his mutant family, especially because of the fact that we had that scene where we saw Red Skull killing Cap. Obviously nothing would completely absolve Logan of his guilt, but he's taken out one of the big figureheads that orchestrated the attack, and he did it with the shield that he kept highest in his collection. But I did think it was daft that Red Skull wore Cap's mask. That felt a bit overkill. And this might be me being my dumb reader self, but why was Logan okay with decapitating Red Skull with Cap's shield, but not pop his claws to do it? That was one of those moments where I think Millar was more concerned with the image of what had happened and that was more important than how it played into the story. I get if popping his claws is just a symbolic thing, but I thought it was more about the fight and him being gone. But for me, this was one of those things that made me think that he could have easily fought back against the Hulk gang in issue 1 if this was the case. It's just a shame that such a cool fight breaks down with just a smidge of thought to the overall story, and probably why it's for the best that there was an even more poetic fight waiting in the finale. All things considered, I think that saved the overarching narrative. This is my final verdict. And if your key objective with comics is to be entertained, then Mark Millar would be one of the top 5 creators that I'd personally recommend, and Old Man Logan is a perfect example of why. With just 8 issues, Millar and McNiven give us a look into an intriguing world with a beloved character that's taken us on a journey across it. I can't say it's the most original concept, although it's not a bit derivative of some of Millar's other books, with there being more than a few similarities to Jupiter's Legacy and Wanted, but a supervillain-led dystopian future is a good enough hook that I am more than comfortable with having to experience it more than once. The art is crisp, clean, and dynamic from start to finish, with there being a surprising amount of emotion seeping its way into more than a few key scenes. Yeah, there are a handful of instances where it felt like ideas were half-cooked, which is more unforgivable when this was first coming out and there was no sign that this universe was making a comeback, and some of the character motivations just fell flat for me. But I can't lie, this does more than enough to get me excited in this universe, and I can't wait to revisit what Jeff Lemire did with this. And beyond what it would like to set up, this is an interesting alternate take with an absolutely gut-wrenching twist, and even though it may not always stick the landing, it isn't afraid of going 100 miles an hour in any particular direction. At no moment does this try to trick you into thinking that it's going to be high literature, and there is nothing wrong with the book just being fun and entertaining. Old Man Logan's a story that you could easily read in one sitting, and I definitely recommend it as a palate cleanser, as that was exactly what I needed as a recharge in between bigger runs. But if I had to sum this up in one sentence, if you just want a fun story arc that lets you leave your brain at the door and introduces you into a fun and crazy world, then there's not much better than Old Man Logan. But whether you loved it or hated it, that's the review. And until next time, just make sure that you stay safe and stay mad, all you dogs. Woof woof. See you at the next video.